Hello and welcome on into a special edition of Morning Kickaround, here to take stock of the domestic game in the immediate afterglow of World Cup 2026. And here to add to the conversation, we are happy to be welcomed by Simon Evans, co-founder of the soccer business.
You got it.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, Rob. You always throw me off when you say we're happy to be welcomed by, and I'm like, we're welcoming in. We're welcoming him. He's welcoming us, and we're all welcoming each other. Welcome to the show, Simon. It's good to see you.
I'm feeling very, very welcomed. Yeah, thank you.
That's good. That's the important part. Feeling welcomed. I think this, and Rob, I mean, obviously we are doing this first for our members, and then hopefully other people will be watching us later. And out of the World Cup, what are we talking about most in American soccer? Yeah, you know, it's great that Spain won, and Argentina is this, and Argentina is that, and the spectacle, the ticket prices. But can this help American soccer take the next step? Will this bring soccer into the mainstream, Simon? I know you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it is. I mean, these debates are all the same, aren't they? You know, I mean, when the U.S. national team were eliminated, we had a debate about pay to play. We do that every 4 years. Yeah, these are kind of rituals. And, where does soccer go from here? I mean, I think the World Cup was about as mainstream as soccer could get in the United States, no? I mean, it was everywhere. I mean, I think from that point of view, you know, there were, and let's not forget, there were some critical voices at the start saying this thing's going to be a flop. Americans don't really care about it. You know, they're going to struggle to sell tickets. I mean, if you remember the first few games of the tournament, you know, the British press in particular were playing hunt the empty seat. You know, where are these empty seats? And if some VIPs were back late from their halftime feast, then, there was a photo of some empty seats going around. That whole narrative vanished very, very quickly. And it was clear that, you know, it was mainstreaming the culture as well, wasn't it? It was over the news. I mean, just my local news channels that, you know, took time out from like squirrels on the roofs and cats that have gone missing and so on. And it was watch parties. They were covering watch parties every day. Oh, look what the Brazilian community are doing today and all that kind of stuff. So it was completely mainstream. Does it stay mainstream? That's the question. Is MLS mainstream? These are the big questions. And the answers are, we know that domestic soccer is not mainstream in the way that the World Cup has been. Obviously, that's what makes the World Cup soccer. The question is, how do you get it into that position? How do we move it forward? And is there some momentum here that can be built upon? I think that's the interesting question.
Yeah, can the domestic game remain mainstream? And that's really ultimately the big crux of the conversation we brought you in for. It was wonderful to see the local news across the country. There were some days where it was like Kansas City local news, Detroit local news, across the country, and even when the United States men's national team was in the knockouts, it was on the call-in sports radio stations here, on stations that, you know, never touch soccer with a 10-foot pole. And can that stay in the mainstream? Can the American game stay there? And in some of your writing at the soccer business, you're talking about probably the interest beyond, you know, the couple weeks where it was mainstream for the World Cup, the interest in the big products or licenses are probably going to increase. The Premier League, European soccer, and the European Championship, Champions League, stuff like that. But maybe the conversations for the domestic league, the MLSs, the USLs, the NWSLs, might not have as direct a bump. They didn't, you know, just all of a sudden strike gold with the World Cup being here. But you said there's maybe some easier conversations in the C-suites.
I think the conversations are already getting easier. Yeah, I mean, I had David Wright, the CCO of US Soccer, on the Soccer Business podcast that I do, and he was saying how, you know, they managed to build record-breaking revenue from partnerships in the build-up to the World Cup. And he said the people who are on the other side of the table now, they are soccer people in the sense that they've played the game. They're executives who've played the game, or their kids have played the game. And I think that does make I think that does make a difference.
That's to me everything, Simon. I'm sorry that is so important to me because I keep preaching, and I've been doing this for 15 years. You cannot cheat time, right? You can't cheat the slow infiltration of the sport into the culture, right? And that, as much as the big event of the World Cup brings new eyeballs, and hopefully some of them stick around, ultimately what's going to get the sport into the quote unquote mainstream is what you're talking about. The people on the other side from U.S. Soccer, the people who are engaging in the conversation. I mean, this is why I just listened to a podcast with John Skipper, who talked about, the World Cup and ESPN and how important it was to him, and him bringing the World Cup to the mainstream, so to speak, by putting on ESPN. More skippers are more important than, say, the big event in America.
I think so, yeah, and there are signs across the landscape, really. I mean, it was quite amusing with some of the talking heads on sports TV shows who clearly never ever pay any attention to soccer, and then they had to fake it for a month, and it was quite amusing sometimes, wasn't it? But Colin Cowherd, right, he's clearly a soccer guy, right? He's you don't get much more mainstream than a guy like that on his show, and he's clearly a soccer guy and can have an intelligent conversation about the game. All those kind of things are starting to change a little bit, I think. The big question is, I mean, you're talking, Robert, you were referring to what I was saying about like the media rights fees and so on, where I think, there's going to be big battles for the World Cup rights. They're up for grabs for 2030. There's going to be huge battles for those now. And the same with the Champions League, I think, and these, what I call big soccer properties, yeah? And and the smaller ones, those domestic European leagues, I think this is interesting, are struggling now a little bit. Serie A, the Bundesliga.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bundesliga, who just signed I think it was the Bundesliga just signed a new deal. Do I have my league right? Fandango. USA Network and Fandango for $100 million, which, drop in the bucket compared to what the Premier League gets. Certainly. I mean, that kind of speaks to the problem of the fractured nature of football, of soccer side. I mean, there's so many properties and this is obviously a problem for Major League Soccer. If we're talking about the domestic product, they're not competing against the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball for just attention in sports in America. They're also competing on the other front.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely crucial that in this context, because let's face it, the bulk of money that drives this sport is those TV media rights deals. And it's absolutely essential that between now and 2029, when that Apple deal ends, MLS is in that big soccer category. And it's not in there as like, hey, shall we go for Serie A, the Bundesliga, La Liga, or MLS? No, it's got to be as a property that people really want to have, because it's driving eyeballs. And, that's a really difficult task for whoever the next commissioner of MLS is, because, you've got that problem with the Apple ecosystem and so on, that as the numbers haven't been too clear, they've been getting better and so on, and they're trying to give information for exactly this reason. But MLS, if it wants to move to the next level, I was just reading Paul Tenorio's piece in the Athletic this morning. He's talking about the roster rules and all those things, and that's all true. But to get to the next level, they've got to get the TV deal. They've got to get a big money TV deal.
What you're describing reminds me of what we're seeing in many industries across the marketplace in all walks of life. Is this another example of the K-shaped economy, kind of in a microcosm for these TV rights? There's the few big properties that are going higher and higher and higher as far as value, and then the rest of the leagues are maybe in that downward part of that K on the graph. And is it even possible to go from that lower echelon to jump into the uptick of the K?
That's the one for me, Simon, because American soccer fans love to kind of stand outside of the domestic game so they can point and then criticize and not feel connected, and therefore have their value as soccer fans impacted by where MLS is in the pecking order and things like that. But there is a real question of, should MLS, and you read Paul Tenorio's piece, and he's been making this argument, and I certainly have, that the league has been too restrictive on spending rules, or too complicated for those things, and isn't engaged truly in the player marketplace. But is there a real argument for MLS to spend out ahead of those television rights, of trying to juice the attention on their league in new ways, different ways than they have to this point, with older European players and a couple of young players who maybe break through? Is that something that makes economic sense? Because that's the argument that Tenorio's making.
I think it does make economic sense, because that's how you unlock and get yourself into that big soccer category and get yourself out of the niche soccer category. And as long as MLS is seen as some nice to have niche add-on league, which is, let's be honest, that's how the likes of ESPN and NBC have viewed it for most of its life. As soon as it becomes something worth fighting over, then you're into a different level of money. But to Robert's point, you talk to people who know the media rights situation in the United States much better than I do, people whose job it is to know these things. And their argument is that actually most sports properties, PGA Golf, NHL, and so on, they're going to find it hard to increase growth because so much is going into the NFL now. They've spun out their rights across the board so that everybody is putting a bulk of them because it just brings such an audience. And so that's what you're talking about there, I think, Robert, with the K-shaped situation. That is a real challenge, an added complication into the mix. But I think, to go back to your point, if they invest in bringing in, I'm concerned that we're seeing, again, a wave of sort of older players like this. I mean, I think the league had done quite well for a while to sort of start to shed the retirement league tag. And it's pretty hard to argue against it when, players of 37, 38-year-old are coming in. But okay.
Well, yes, I agree with you. And I think
it is hard to say no to, right?
Robert Lewandowski appealing to a city with a huge Polish population and all those things. Right. And again, we know that Lewandowski's a fit person. Whether or not he's at the level anymore is definitely a question. But we just watched Lionel Messi. He did incredible stuff at the World Cup. So I wonder if that helps a little bit. I know it's maybe just chipping away at that perception, but I want that helps a little bit. But obviously, the argument with Lewandowski, in light of the fact that they sold Hugo Kuipers to Monterrey, I think, is that under the current rules, they can't keep both those players, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the budget flexibility. So, yes, on the field, it's a problem. Do you play them together? Things like that. But Greg Berhalter doesn't even have that option because if the club decides we want Robert Lewandowski to boost our image in Chicago as we get ready to build a stadium and try to capture more attention in our city in a crowded sports marketplace, we can't also keep the Golden Boot leader. That's a problem for MLS teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And but there is that investment goes into those things. It's interesting you draw that point about the stadium. So millions going into stadiums. New York City FC, into Miami, about $1 billion for that stadium. Incredible money to go into those things. But that's still helping the local community side of MLS, the match day experience side of MLS that we all know is pretty good, right? If you live in an MLS market, it's pretty good. The problem to get to the next level isn't that. So the money, can you start signing those 26, 27-year-old players who we've seen in the World Cup, right? I mean, not the ones who are necessarily playing in the Premier League, but in other leagues. Can you go and bring in a guy start signing people from the Belgian league for 26 years of age,
Well, they have done some of that. I mean, I would point to a Joseph
America,
a Joseph Paintsill would be a good example of a player who, but again, these are not stars, and you have a jaded American sports fan base that even if they don't know soccer, understand the difference between a 26-year-old coming out of Belgium and Anderlecht or whatever, and the players that they see on television who are going to the Premier League or in La Liga and those kind of places, right? So Major League Soccer is always going to suffer a perception problem because, and the other thing is here, getting over that mountain of you don't have access to the number one club competition on the planet. Geographically, you are locked out of the Champions League, Simon.
Yeah.
So, and I imagine there's a lot of talk about this, right? It's why the League's Cup exists, because they're trying to find a way to at least chip away at the problem of not having a major club competition that will attract those players. And there should be enough players to get quality in, but I think there's that perception gap. Like, you can tell American fans the soccer's pretty good. It's pretty good, but they're not going to believe you because it doesn't, because they don't play in the Champions League. They're not Premier League clubs. They don't have, they're not spending 100 million pounds on Morgan Rogers, that kind of club.
Yeah, no, I know, and probably never should do, but it's no, that is true, and I think how do you build that that credibility through international competition? Are those fans that you're talking about, are they going to be impressed if MLS teams start winning the CONCACAF Champions Cup? I don't know if that moves the needle.
No,
it'd be a good thing in itself. It's a good thing to do, but does that move the needle? I mean, more competition with Mexico, expanding out the League's Cup, not expanding out, but improving the League's Cup in a way that it starts to feel much more like a real competition between the two leagues, I think could do a lot. I think that could do a lot within this market, but it doesn't quite do what you're talking about. I'm not sure anything can really, because even if you set up some like, Club World Cup style competition between the winners of the Americas against Europe or something, it's it would feel fake at the start and in a way that the Club World Cup didn't feel totally real.
At the same time, right? So the World Cup has a pedigree. It goes back to 1930. Obviously, people can point to El Pele and all these things, but I do think that in general, what we learned from the World Cup is that if you big event something in America, it works. People love a big event here now.
Yeah.
Well, again, whether they are long-term fans now, Simon, is the question. But I don't think we have it. For as much as there was negative stuff around this tournament, and I certainly think people thought, oh, it could go very wrong in certain ways, including empty seats. America shows up for a big event.
Oh, yeah.
We knew that the diaspora communities were going to support their teams. Like that's in evidence. How it then can get turned by the domestic competitions and then MLS, but also I think USL, who's in an interesting moment. That's the bigger thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about, the Club World Cup was showed us the potential that there is with club fan bases as well. The diaspora that turned out to watch Flamengo and so on. And there might be some potential, I think, down the line at some stage in the future with competitions involving, maybe you expand out some of the CONCACAF competitions and the CONMEBOL competitions into some sort of merger down the line or whatever. I don't know. There's all kinds of interesting things could be done, but there's none of them. The reason we talk like this is because there isn't an easy fix. There really isn't, and it does probably require, another decade of hard, patient work. But I think it does require some changes as well of the direction that Paul's talking about with the roster rules and just loosening things up and letting some of these teams become big teams. I think that's one side of it as well. That parity is great, but we do like watching big teams.
Yeah, we want to watch the best, and Americans certainly want to see the pinnacle of whatever it may be. And I think after watching 104 games and then you flip over the channel to MLS, I think people can see that. But I see a commenter here, one of our MK Ultras is commenting that Americans in general, generalizing here, are expecting the best without giving the opportunity to build it. And it might be just the time. You referenced the stadium building. And then obviously that's a huge part of building community and building interest in the local areas is improving the stadia. And then, but with the world that it is and the dramatic nature of the current economy and how things are moving, will that time be allowed for that to occur? And then your stance, though, kind of shifting gears a little bit about the stadia. What impact do you think that you kind of were surprised, or you kind of had a little bit of surprise in your voice? You're talking about all the millions that are being invested in the stadium across the country. Do you think that's that benefit of enhancing the local product helps in the business world, or is that like a lot of money to put in on a very uncertain ground at this point?
No, I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, it sends a really strong message to everyone that you're there. There's so many things in a modern stadium, and these MLS stadiums really are considered, I think for a lot of people around the world, the state of the art now. They are. I mean, not in their size, but, talking to people from outside the States who visited Inter Miami Stadium, for example, and they're like very impressed by it for a 26,000 capacity venue, which, let's face it, most European leagues don't get anywhere near 26,000 people. So they're looking at those stadiums and going, wow, how much stuff is going on here, the hospitality, the facilities, and so on. I think it sends a strong message. It generates revenue. I mean, and what's the alternative, right? I mean, the alternative is people playing. I mean, you see it still, in USL with a club like Atletico Dallas that seem to be doing so many things right. And then you look at it and you go, but you're playing at the Cotton Bowl? I mean,
Yeah.
these are all, or you're playing at, college fields and so on. It makes such a difference. It really does.
Yeah, one of my other sort of hobby horse conversations has always been until there are, roots in the ground, and those stadiums represents roots in the ground. It's easy for people in a local community to think of the soccer team as ephemeral. It might disappear tomorrow. What would they play in that other stadium? Who knows? And obviously, there's a history of that in American soccer, right? How many clubs have died. And so to build a stadium is to say we are now a permanent fixture of this community. You can see our name on a building as you drive past, usually on a freeway that shouldn't be going through a city, but that's a different question, a different conversation. So we are in this moment. There's lots of infrastructure, and I always come back to this, Simon, and you being on the business side. There's never any sense of like, oh, we're okay now. Like we're just sort of here, and it starts to, rather than the active push to grow, which I think is detrimental to enjoyment for a lot of fans, because again, you're always comparing yourself to somebody else. Like I know this probably does happen in the big 5 leagues of Europe, but outside of that, there aren't fans of Anderlecht or any of those Club Brugge who are sitting there going, "Oh man, we need to grow and get better. Why isn't our league getting better television deals so we can compete with the Bundesliga?" They're not doing that. They're just supporting their club. Are we capable of that in America?
That's a really good question. Yeah, and it does affect the lower division discourse, doesn't it? Because, we can look at MLS and start talking about, can MLS get to that next level? And that's good. That shows us ambition there. It's not settling. It would be pretty sad if American soccer said, like, you know what, we're doing better than the Belgian league in a lot of ways. That the useful measuring sticks, but you don't want to settle for that. But outside of MLS, if you're in these markets where we're talking about having MLS Next Pro teams being set up or USL teams being set up, and you're not going to be supporting a team that's going to get anywhere near to the top, not going to be playing against Mexican teams, not going to be in the conversation internationally at all. You're just supporting your local team because that's what you do. That is something that's quite new, I think, in a lot of those in those places. But there are other examples where you can tap into it. People support high school football teams that aren't very good, but they go along every Friday out of loyalty.
Culture. That's culture.
It's the thing,
exactly
it's the thing to do in your town.
Yeah.
That's culture. And this is what I mean by you can't cheat time. You can't fast forward to that time when, grandpa gave me this fandom, this passion for this team. Right? That we're not there yet, just in terms of the timeline of modern American soccer. So yeah, everything that is not that to me feels, I don't know. It feels like sometimes it's not worth the effort put in or the thought or the energy put in. But I understand people just don't want to sit on their hands either. So I don't know. And again, stadiums are important. So, as we move forward here, those things of MLS isn't getting the TV numbers. Why does that matter unless it really matters to you that MLS is competitive in a world market for the top class players? And then again, why is that an important end for Major League Soccer? What is, again, if this is paying back the investor, Simon, then obviously they're going to be chasing growth because investing is about growth. But as a fan in American soccer, why you need to sell me on why all this is important, I guess. And I think too many people just kind of go along with it. Like what's good for the owners is good for me. And I don't know if I always believe that.
Yeah, but I think it's an American thing about wanting to be the best, isn't it? And it's a cliche.
We come back to that. Yes, of course. That's what it is.
Yes. But it's true, though. It is. And it's like people are not going to take MLS seriously across the board and treat it the same way they treat the NBA unless it gets to that status. So, is that something worth chasing? I think it is.
Okay.
Should it spoil your enjoyment? Would it be nice if we could sometimes just go? I think a lot of people do just go along, right? I've been to MLS games in like Columbus, for example, and people aren't talking about it all the time. It's something
we're in a
like
different
us
class.
do. Really.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm in a different class of person. I'm an overthinker. That's fair. Rob, if we want to talk about something besides this, what else can we bring up with Simon?
Well, one of the things on the Soccer Business site that I've enjoyed, one of your pieces was the 5 key points of difficulties for implementing the promotion and relegation. And that's one of the things that I didn't think was talked about that much throughout the broadcast of World Cup 2026 was, one of the entities in American soccer is trying to implement promotion relegation on a professional scale, and it's a huge undertaking. I didn't think that got a lot of light. And when I was kind of digging into, what's the progress on, USL Premier coming along, and what are some updates, what are some breadcrumbs as far as the development of USL Premier and promotion relegation. And I was shocked to see, since Tony Scholes was announced that he was being hired to lead the charge toward these huge projects anywhere, but in American soccer, even bigger. But I haven't seen anything since his November announcement, and that has my brow furrowed just a bit.
Yeah, it has gone quiet on that front, and I think USL maybe has stepped back a little bit in terms of its communication strategy. I'm guessing here. I've not had a conversation about this, but we all had lots of conversations about where they were popping up in cities all over America and saying, the city is in favor of having a team here. We hope to have an ownership group in place soon. Here's a sketch of what the stadium's going to look like in small town USA, and it's all very exciting. And then we turn around after a few months and say, well, actually, was there anything there really, or was that just an announcement to generate some buzz and so on? And I think I think there was some criticism within USL of that as a strategy for building up this hype in all these cities and going everywhere, because after half a year of doing that, people were turning around and going, is any of this actually happening, or are they just talking a big game, right? So that I think that when it comes to the credibility of a project as big as building out USL Premier and promotion and relegation, that might have taken a bit of a toll. So I think maybe USL now, I would imagine, is looking at it, and they've obviously had some changes of personnel that are not unrelated to what we just talked about. And I think they're maybe looking at it and going, let's talk when we have something to talk about, something fixed.
Well, it's obviously interesting that kind of slowdown of news and the trickle ending. And Paul McDonough was out there a bunch, and the personnel you're mentioning, Justin Papadakis, kind of pushed out when the new money came in through private equity, Bell Tower, and I think there's another one. That all happened. We talked about it. Then MLS Next Pro got their own private equity injection and launched Hometown Soccer Holdings, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And, there's been a little bit of news in that area. We know that Toronto's moving their MLS Next Pro team to a different community and opening up a new stadium. So to give it Barrie, Ontario, to give its own identity, which we know is they have said that's part of the MLS Next Pro plan. So for MLS Next Pro to sort of jump into the same waters that we knew USL was already exploring was part of this, right? The new soccer wars, I guess, Simon. And I don't blame USL if they don't have anything to announce yet for not announcing anything, but you made a lot of noise, and people are going to be scratching their heads about where this is going. And again, Tony Scholes was supposed to be on the job at the end of the Premier League season, or at least that was the wording in all the press releases, and no one knows. Well, we don't know where he is. He could be there. They're just not telling us.
Yeah, I mean, what we have had news-wise, there's been a couple of positive things. I mean, given that USL Premier requires a mixture of new clubs and USL Championship clubs upgrading themselves, we've seen significant investment into Detroit City last week. Some money going in there, which is helping them with building out that, I think it's 15,000-seater stadium in Detroit. Which looks exactly what they should be doing if they're turning these clubs into these D1 clubs, yeah? And then the other positive news was, the ownership group really coming together in Oklahoma City. I'm sure you've already done an episode I haven't seen, but you'll have debated the OKC United aspect of it, I'm sure.
We did.
That's the base for you guys, is that one.
Yeah. Go find it on the YouTube channel right now. Our badge review for OKC United. Absolutely.
Yeah. But that looks like it's a project that's, although there was an OKC team in USL in the past, it's effectively an expansion project, isn't it? And it's a new club, and everything about it, the ownership group and the stadium plans and everything suggests that is USL Premier level. So I think when you look at Detroit or Oklahoma City, you're seeing that. Is that enough momentum at this stage for something that's supposed to be started in 2028? it's not really, is it? But they're two positive stories that at least they can point to.
Yeah,
Sacramento getting their stadium
Right.
going.
Yeah.
That's another one. Yeah. And I think which club was it, Rob, that I was kind of cynical and imagined that maybe some of the new investment might be positioned to like, oh, let's go for MLS one day. I mean, that's the thing that is always kind of
Mesa,
lurking.
Arizona.
No, I don't think it was Mesa. It was a different one recently. But
we did talk about Sacramento too. You thought that they were, because they upgraded, they expanded their plans.
No, there's a different one. It doesn't matter. My brain is failing me, so it's not your fault. But that thing is also hanging over these clubs, Simon. That as long as MLS still has the door open, it isn't saying we're done, we're closed, there's no more expansion. There's a level of city that they're probably not dreaming of MLS because it's beyond them. But there will be places like Detroit and Sacramento and Mesa, Arizona, and even OKC, which is a major league sports city in the sense that they have an NBA franchise, where I wonder sometimes about new investment and whether that is sort of like, okay, like, yeah, we're USL Premiers where we want to be. But in the background, it's always really at least leaving open that possibility. Maybe not playing that card now, but leaving up with that possibility that what we're doing here is lining up to potentially jump into Major League Soccer. And I know you have to have 500 million plus now to even get an expansion for a franchise in MLS, but that ability to attract those investors gets better when you have a 20,000 seat stadium already ready to go.
Yeah, and you've got an ownership group with multiple millionaires and private equity companies in place, and you can build out from that. I mean, we've seen it happen before in the past. And it's an interesting one because, I've thought about this quite a lot, and this is just literally something that's been going around in my head. It's not something I've reported out or anything, but this assumption that MLS is very close to the end of expansion because we've got to 30 teams. And, well, in America, you stop at like 32. Does MLS seem like the kind of league that would stop at 32 and turn down perhaps 8 more 500 million expansion fees?
Right. I do think it would require being very creative with your competition format and probably doing, two different quote unquote leagues without promotion or relegation, just 2 split leagues and figuring it. I don't know that they'd be willing to do that because it might mean some teams don't see each other, or you'd have to find cross conference play and that. But it's always, what I'm saying is always possible to be creative.
40 teams split in half seems realistic.
By the way, it was Detroit, Rob, that I brought up the possibility that the new money coming in from the Rocket Mortgage guy may, yes, I'm supporting soccer in Detroit. They're building a stadium. I'm new money to help for USL. But again, Detroit is a major league sports city. And as long as USL Premier, even if they call themselves D1, even if they get sanctioned D1, is thought of as a level below, why wouldn't we presume that guy at least has MLS in his head, even if it's not right now?
Yeah, I mean, we just don't know. And in the situation in Sacramento, the mayor has been talking about it pretty openly, hasn't he? Like, oh, we would, the stadium's being built bigger.
Mayors love to talk MLS. They don't want to talk USL. They want to talk MLS.
And like, his staff there, which includes, the people who used to work at USL headquarters who are now working at that club, are like, no, we're focused on USL here. And the mayor's like, yeah, but one day.
Yeah.
So, who knows? Who knows where it all goes? I mean, you've got MLS expanding out to all these secondary markets with the 2 teams, the reserve teams, creating all these new brands and teams around the country. USL trying to do the same in bigger markets than that. There's a lot of things have to happen, over the next 5 years. It's going to, if it all comes off, it will be an unprecedented spell of like club building and stadium building. It will be absolutely remarkable. If it doesn't, I don't know where they go from here, because you kind of, I think USL going out there and saying, we're going to do this, and everyone applauded the optimism and so on. If you can't walk the walk afterwards, where does that leave you?
Oh yeah, they're pushing all their chips in. For sure.
Yeah.
That's what this is. And that's why it's scary. And I have said before, and I know we want to keep you forever, Simon, but as I've said before, I do think MLS, or American soccer rather, has done the same thing over and over and over again, which is a league comes, a league dies, clubs come, clubs die. We're doing this half measures. We're playing in rented venues. Everything is kind of awkward and uncomfortable and not fully funded. That a new idea, even one as sort of over the top as we're going for D1 status, we're building a bunch of stadiums, we're doing promotion relegation, feels kind of necessary to rock the boat. But it absolutely is an experiment with no idea what the results are going to be. None. We have no idea if this is going to work.
No.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any business precedents for going out on a limb like some of these teams are that are going there. Like, are other industries built on kind of hope that a league that has maybe a rocky business history and has taken on a lot of different forms already? Actually, as we're talking this out, it seems even braver by those investors to build something permanent and at this large of a scale in an entity like USL that, hasn't had the most stable of footing up to this point.
No, yeah, that's true. But I think I remember speaking to somebody who was looking at building out a club in a fairly big market, and they said, and I was like, "Are you going with USL? Are you going with MLS Next Pro or whatever?" He said, "I want to build a soccer club in this city that's going to play professional soccer, right?" And in that case, it was a USL they were looking at, but they were like, that might change. And I think some of those people who are putting that amount of money in, like you're seeing in Detroit and places like that, they're not going to be romantic about what league they're involved in. I don't think. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're putting in hundreds of millions into building these stadiums, and the league's project doesn't work, they will go to another league, won't they?
Go somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the history of American soccer. Again, like everything is top down. So we start a league and then we go find clubs. We're getting to a point now where, because there are options on some level, certainly MLS Next Pro and USL and those things, then people who want to invest in soccer can now say, well, I'm not going to be league agnostic, but I'm going to pick the league that's going to give me the best chance for success, or I'm going to pick the league that I think is most stable, right? That's going to deliver games for the next however long I want to be owning this club, because that has always been a problem in American soccer. It's not just that your club might die because revenue is hard to come by and the numbers are red. It's that the league itself might collapse sometimes. And if you want to talk about an example of things, Rob, go back to the NASL, go back to the Bill Peterson days, go back to when Rocco got involved initially, and sort of where, actually, I think it's probably pre-Rocco, to be fair to him, where NASL suddenly said, we want to be Division One. And we want to go be expansive. We want to expand in all these big cities. And the league wasn't ready for it. They weren't even close to ready for it. They got way out over their skis. And what happened? The league collapsed and ultimately ends up with Rocco suing U.S. Soccer, which, maybe there was something there, but that's a big lift to prove it.
Yeah, indeed. And a lot of unanswered questions ahead. And just from a media perspective, I think it's interesting and telling that through all these grandiose announcements of a new Division One league and the Pro Rel, has there really been like an open question and answer to reporters where just, they can be peppered with questions on these subjects? I mean, does that mean there's more questions than answers? That's kind of
a USL press conference?
Yeah,
is that a thing?
I don't know. I've never been to one.
I don't think they've ever had one. I mean, I think it would do them good to because look, it's not, and we'll finish with this, Simon. We were just talking about this. Like, we were like, okay, we've gotten some attention recently on videos we made a year ago about USL's plans, about the announcement that they have USL Premier in the works, about the Pro Rel. And people are leaving comments about where this thing is right now, or people are clearly looking for answers and information. And as far as I'm aware, you're covering the business side of it, and I think you're probably the number one resource on this, at least for me. Beyond the 90, which is what Kartik and a couple other people,
Alex,
they are covering this because they have a distinct. And then it's us, and we're treating this as we're not on the ground reporting. We're mostly responding to what's out there, and occasionally we'll ask a question, but that's it. As far as I can tell, that's it. You'll get an athletic story if and when Paul McDonough is made available, right? That's it. And I'm not blaming them for not chasing a story that's really hard to report and doesn't really get won't get the same sort of attention as, a Lionel Messi story about MLS or Jorge Mas story about MLS. But that says a lot about where USL is in the awareness of their program, that there are very few outlets that are really reporting on this from a knowledgeable place outside of a local ABC 5 saying, oh, there might be a team here.
Well, locally there's problems as well. I mean, I got called up by a local newspaper reporter in one of the MLS Next Pro markets with an independent club who was like, "What is this league that we're going into? What is? Can you? I've been on your website. I've seen you write about it. Can you tell me what this league is and stuff?" So there's a lot of work to be done for USL and MLS Next Pro, sort of explaining all that. And my worry a little bit is, and we mentioned this before, going back to that sort of post World Cup momentum thing. Like, if there are a ton of stories about conflicts and soccer wars, that's not good. We don't want loads of cities where it's like, teams might be going to this league or that league, or there's two teams being set up in one city and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but it should be a busy time if all this stuff actually happens. Right?
It should be fun. I mean, it's going to be fun for us. I mean, if you don't have skin in the game, or you're not having to figure these things out, I guess. I mean, and even then, maybe it's exciting in Tampa and in New York right now.
Yeah, an excited observer from this side of it, and we'll see how this all plays out. Definitely lots of questions to be answered and hoops to be jumped through. But Simon Evans, thank you for spending so much time with us here on this member special edition of Morning Kickaround. I know the members have been popping in the chat quite a bit. There's a lot on your website, and you have a couple different platforms you're on. Can you tell the folks
the main thing is
where to find you?
Yeah, so the newsletter comes out every Friday. It's got a lot of micro news about the lower divisions, sponsorship deals, and so on, and the business of the game. But NWSL, USL, as well as MLS and Next Pro and everything else comes out every Friday. You can sign up at thesoccerbusiness.com, and it's free, and it's every Friday in your email. And there's a podcast that we put out that also gets obviously promoted through the newsletter as well.
All right, Simon, huge thanks to you for all of your time, and thank you for your continued work here on the American game here. We appreciate it a ton. And thank you, members, for tuning in. And then when the mass public gets to view this, thank you for tuning in as well. We'll be back for our regular show on Friday. Until then, everybody, enjoy your soccer.